This speaker is going to talk to us about orangutan, which are not as well known as the chimps or the gorillas, but like their African cousins, they are great apes and are our closest relatives in the animal kingdom and the most intelligent creatures that have evolved on land save for humans. They're reclusive, they're semi-solitary, they're arboreal, and they're colored red. They spend 95% of their time in trees, which along with vines and termites provides 99% of their food. And Borneo, their principal home, is being deforested by sweeping clearances at a furious rate. This brings us to Birutė Galdikas, who we saw first here in the year 2000. And I'd like her to come up here and tell us about the good news and the bad news since then. Birutė?
Well, let's talk about orangutans. And I have to say that I think Moses very well summarized what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it at greater length and with more emphasis. Orangutans are one of our closest living relatives in the animal kingdom. Orang means person, hutan is forest in Indonesian, and Indonesians acknowledge that orangutans are people of the forest. Traditionally, they believed that orangutans could speak, orangutans could use spoken language, but that they refused to do so because they don't want to be put to work. And I have been studying life histories of wild orangutans, and one of the things that we have been able to document is the fact that orangutans have the longest birth interval of any mammal, characteristically 8 to 10 years, which makes them very vulnerable to extinction. We also have documented the fact that in the forests of Tanjung Puting, orangutan females do not give birth until they are, for the first time, until they are 15, 16, or even 17 years of age. Again, making them very vulnerable to extinction. Orangutans share 97 to 98% of their DNA with humans, but they are very different from humans. An orangutan doesn't need you or me. An orangutan doesn't need other orangutans. An adult male orangutan basically is alone once he reaches adulthood. The whole universe could crumble, but he is a self-contained universe unto himself. A female orangutan is very similar, except that, of course, she usually has an infant or a juvenile with her. And it's comparing them with humans diminishes them because they travel through life basically depending on nobody other than themselves. And this is their strength, but it's also been their downfall, because they do not act collectively except sort of over great distances. They do not form social groups. They live their entire lives in adulthood basically alone. So where are the orangutans? Orangutans are only found 2 places on this planet, Borneo and Sumatra. Orangutans are intimately connected to the tropical rainforest. It's the only habitat they have. They can pass through other habitats, but that's the only one that they live in. They are almost entirely arboreal, although the adult males will wander great distances on the ground. And one of the things that we study are the life histories of orangutans, particularly the reproductive behaviors of the males. And again, they're very unique. An adult male orangutan may not get cheek pads until he is in his 30s, or in captivity he may get them when he's 13. But once he gets them, they do not tolerate any other male in the vicinity, especially one with cheek pads. What I wish to describe is the threats that orangutan populations are under. There are only a few biologically viable populations of orangutans left in Borneo. And the threats are numerous, and they are threats to the rainforest. Logging. This picture I took in the middle of the national park 7 years ago. Fortunately, we were able to stop it. Gold mining, zircon mining. It's a mineral, it's used in ceramics, it's also used in the triggers of nuclear weapons. and apparently the mainland Chinese have an insatiable appetite for it. And the pollution in the rivers looks like this because of gold mining and zircon mining. And these are the open sand pits that are left as a result of these types of mining. One of the cruelest ironies of this age is that palm oil plantations, which are the number one enemy of wild orangutans and other wildlife in Borneo and Sumatra and Indonesia and Malaysia, that the price of oil palm has gone up because of its increasing use for biofuels. This is what it looks like. It's been called the golden fruit because you can extract 3 different kinds of oils from it. One of them is used in cooking oil, others for pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, and third for lubricants. And it's been called the cruel oil because palm oil is responsible for the destruction of tropical rainforests in both Borneo and Sumatra. And now the Africans have realized the great potential of palm oil, and so now more and more palm oil plantations are being planted in Africa, which is where, of course, palm oil originated. In order to clear the forests for palm oil, you, of course, destroy them. This is what it looks like. And this is the appalling trail of destruction caused by the palm oil industry. You'll see the orangutan female used for prostitution. But what is worse is the male who is burned alive, because as these forests are converted to palm oil plantations, the animals that live there, including orangutans and gibbons, who are also apes, are absolutely, their populations are absolutely. Our work lately has focused on conservation, and the largest conservation issue for Tanjung Puting is fire. The wildfires of 1997 were the largest wildfires in human history. These fires were absolutely devastating. You can see burned forest, non-burned forest. Whole tropical peat swamp forests were turned to open, shallow lakes. And of course, these fires were facilitated by the fact that the Indonesian Forestry Department and the Indonesian government basically have not been managing their forests well. 70% of the logging of the timber that leaves in central Indonesian Borneo is illegal. And widespread illegal logging left masses of branches and timber, wood litter on the forest floor. This provided fuel for the fires. And the other thing that's happening is that the El Nino weather cycle, which brings drought to Indonesia, is accelerating. And it used to come once every 7 or 10 years. Now it's coming every 3 years. And so these fires are becoming much more frequent. You combine that with the lack of resource management, and you get a recipe for disaster. And these fires are very different from the wildfires we know in North America or Australia. They don't rapidly move through the ecosystem. They move through the peat swamp forests slowly. The peat can be 20, 30 meters deep. And in order to fight these fires, you literally have to put the water into the peat. These are not easy fires to fight. And of course, the main victims are wildlife. And not just orangutans. This orangutan may not have died of starvation. He probably survived. Orangutans are opportunistic. But we had a British student recently, and she looked at the insects in areas where fires have been widespread. And the dragonflies were okay, but the stick insects were virtually gone. So we don't even know what these fires ultimately will mean. So I have a few points to make. Most of these fires are started by illegal human activities. Indonesia is the third largest contributor. It's the third largest carbon emission source on this planet after the United States and China because of these forest fires that burn every year that there is an El Nino weather phenomena. And why do we have these fires? Well, I'm an anthropologist. I'm a biological anthropologist, but an anthropologist. These fires have something to do with culture. Traditional Indonesian culture, fire was used to clear the land, but in modern Indonesian culture, fire is being used to clear the tropical rainforests after the valuable wood has been taken out for palm oil plantations. And sometimes I lay in bed at night and I can't sleep because I wonder, how are we going to stop these fires? How are we going to put a stop to them? And we are supported. I established a foundation a number of years ago, OFI, and one of the things that we do is we return wild-born ex-captive orangutans to the forest. We now have at our orangutan care center in quarantine over 300 orangutan orphans, and the problem that we have is once these orphans grow up, there will be virtually no forest for them to return to. So thank you very much. Huh?